Welcome to Proline TV here on this Tuesday, April 1st. Kevin Rogers with you as we take a look at NHL first period best bets as well as trends from every game in the NHL this evening. And we will get to the big Google sheet so you can see all the stats basically in for yourself. So we're going to do that right now. And let's get to the games. First, we're going to begin with the Panthers and the Canadiens. They meet in Montreal. The Panthers 0-3 this year against the Canadiens. They lost 4-2 on Sunday. So obviously they want to get just one win against Montreal. The Panthers fighting it out with the Maple Leafs and the Lightning for first place in the Atlantic Division. So let's look at the numbers here for the first period between these two teams. Montreal comes in 12-9-14 at home in the first period this year at the Bell Center. The Panthers 14-11-10 on the road. Meanwhile, the Panthers 22-13 to the over in the first period. Montreal 22-13 to the over in the first period. And that first period over sitting at minus 125. So not bad numbers there. Let's look at the Panthers, what they've done recently. And they have not been good in the first period. You go back through the last 8 games, they have not led after the first period. They tied Montreal at 1 on Sunday. They actually scored a goal later in the first period after trailing 1-0, but ended up losing that game 4-2. And you see some of these numbers and what they're laying in the first period, over 200 the last 3 games, and still never led after the first. For Montreal and what they have done in the first period, they haven't been good either. And you see that's the last 7 games, they have not led after the first period, but they have gone the last 8 games in the first period. They have gone over the total. So Montreal on a huge overrun in the first period over the last 8 games. And we'll see what happens again tonight when they hook up at the Bell Center. The Sabres and the Senators in Ottawa tonight. And we'll start with Buffalo. The Sabres currently on a 4-game over streak in the first period. 5 straight games, they've scored at least a goal in the first period. And coming off that big win over Washington on Saturday, or Sunday rather, on the second of a back-to-back. Meanwhile, for Ottawa, they are off that 1-0 loss in overtime at Pittsburgh, the game that Sidney Crosby scored the game-winning goal in OT that snapped the 3-game over streak in the first period. But also Ottawa has not trailed after the first period in the past 5 games. In fact, dating back to March 10th, they've trailed after the first only once, and that came against Colorado back on March 20th. So Ottawa has been decent in the first period, and you see there March 25th in Buffalo, they were tied at 1 after the first period, a game that the Senators eventually lost 3-2 to Buffalo. So the Senators right now on it's not a great streak, but they have not trailed that often, but don't know if I'd really lay the half a goal in the first period either with Ottawa, as they are heavy favorites tonight, laying nearly $2 in the game against Buffalo. The Predators and the Blue Jackets, a couple teams that have really struggled in the first period. We got to start with Columbus, and this is pretty amazing. This is now 14 consecutive games. 14 in a row they have not led after the first period. Last time they led was February 25th against Dallas at home. Since then, you see that all the whites and the reds, no greens, they have either trailed or been tied after the first period in 14 straight games. Also, they're on a 4-game over streak in the first period. And in the last 4, they've allowed 10 goals. They've been outscored 10-2 in the first period. For the Nashville Predators, they're off an under last night in the 2-1 loss at Philadelphia. However, though, 4 straight games, they have not allowed a goal in the first period, so that's a positive for the Predators, who, again, have had a disappointing season, but also dating back to March the 4th against Boston, they've trailed 3 times after the first period. They've led 4 times, and they've had a lot of ties in there, but also they've done a good job of, for the most part, you see 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 times they have not allowed a goal in the first period, but 3 times they've allowed 2 goals in the first period. So it's kind of pick your poison on that one. But Nashville, off of this loss at Philadelphia, trying to bounce back tonight against Columbus. Last time they played, the Predators won in overtime 4-3 back on October 26th in Nashville. That game was 0-0 after 1. And again, Columbus, a tough team to back in the first period after they were good for a while in the first period earlier in the season, but they've kind of fallen apart recently. The Capitals and the Bruins in Boston, you would have thought this would have been a good matchup late in the season, but the Bruins have just spun out of control. They're back home from an 0-5 road trip. They've lost 8 in a row overall. They've gone 5 straight without leading after the first period. 4 of those games, they haven't scored a goal in the first period. And the last 3, they've actually given up a goal in the first period. So it's just been terrible all around for the Bruins. Their first game back from this long road trip, they welcome in Washington. And the Capitals off 3 straight losses, kind of a tough stretch for them. Even though they've clinched a playoff berth, they're going to win the Metro. 4 straight overs in the first for Washington. They've been one of the best over teams in the National Hockey League in the first period this season. But you see, 4 straight they've allowed a goal in the first period. And just to give you the number on Washington, what they've done in the first, 48-25 to the over so far this year in the first period. And that is the best number in the NHL for also Washington's only trailed 6 times after the first period on the road this season. Boston, good from an over standpoint in the first period at home, 21-16, 13-11, and 13 at home straight up. So not really that great, but we know the Bruins have had a lot of problems this season. The Lightning and Islanders, they meet up again. They just hooked up in Tampa over the weekend. And that was a game that was won by the Lightning 5-3. They led 3-0 after 1. You see on that homestand, 9-0. They outscored Pittsburgh, Utah, and the Islanders. So that's pretty impressive. Also, Tampa Bay, 5 straight overs in the first period. And it's so amazing because they have done that with 3 shutouts. But again, we've seen a lot of these high-scoring first periods. Now you're going on the road, and they didn't play well against Utah or Vegas, so you wonder if that's going to catch up with them. The Islanders have not been good of late. They've lost 5 straight. They have gone over in 6 of the past 7 in the first period. So both Tampa Bay and the Islanders on good over streaks of late, but also the Islanders in their 2 games against Tampa Bay and Carolina, allowing 5 goals in those 2 games in the first period. So that has not been good for the Islanders. The next game we're going to look at, the Oilers and the Golden Knights. And usually when these teams get together, there's fireworks. And Edmonton, will start with them. 3 straight games without scoring a goal in the first period, 3 straight unders for them. And even going back to March 10th, 7-3 to the under in the first period. So they've had some problems scoring in the first period. We know they've had the injuries. Well, Draisaitl was back, and he picked up a couple of big goals for the Oilers the other night. So that's a good sign for them. For the Vegas Golden Knights, they are on fire. They've won 6 in a row. They have gone under the total in the first period the past 2 to wrap up their road trip in Chicago and Nashville, but they won both those games. They exploded in both those games. And the last time that these teams met up, that Vegas and Edmonton, they hooked up earlier in the season, December 14th in Edmonton, and the Oilers led that game 1-0 after 1. They won 6-3. Before that, Vegas led Edmonton 1-0 at home, won that game 1-0, and before that was 1-0 that the Golden Knights led the Oilers on the road. So all 3 games have gone under the total in the first period. So you wonder if it's going to turn around tonight with these 2 as they meet out at T-Mobile Arena. The Sharks and the Ducks, they're both going nowhere, but it's still on the board, so we're going to talk about it. And San Jose, 14-2, outscored the last 2 games by the Rangers and the Kings. They've gone over in the first period in 3 straight. They were bombarded in the first period the past 2, giving up 2 to the Rangers and 2 to the Kings. And now they take on Anaheim. Earlier in the season when they met, they got shut out 2-0 back in October. They met twice in October, in fact. 0-0, 0-0 in the first 2 meetings. So keep that in mind with these 2 Pacific Division rivals. Taking a look at the Anaheim Ducks. And Anaheim, they are continuing this homestand. They just lost to Toronto back on Sunday. And they have gone under the total in 4 of the past 5 in the first period. And going back to March 12th, they have scored a total of 2 goals in the first period. So they have not been good in the first period. Now they take on San Jose, who was, well, we know they've been good all year, but they have not been good in the first period of late. Now you go from that matchup, which is not going to be great, to the Jets and the Kings, which is going to be a very good game in Los Angeles. And starting with LA, we got to go back to March 8th when they played St. Louis. They played the Blues in a couple games in LA. And starting with March 8th, they have allowed 1 goal in the first period. And if you go back to this, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 games. 13 games the Kings have given up 1 goal in the first period. That's pretty amazing. And they were on a 3-0 under run before hitting the over against San Jose. And those unders are always going to be now shaded, or it's going to be shaded towards the under. That under at some books, DraftKings minus 130 tonight in the first period between LA and Winnipeg. And in their previous meeting, it was 0-0 in Winnipeg after 1 back on January the 10th. Kings ended up winning that game in overtime. And even before that, it was 1-0 at the end of November, a game the Kings won at home 4-1. So low scoring first periods with these teams. With the Winnipeg Jets, they are off of a win over Vancouver, their third straight. That was an under. Look at that, minus 140 against Vancouver, because the Canucks have a lot of first period unders. They're off tonight, but they've had a lot of first period unders. But the Jets, though, that's now 7-2 to the over in the past 9. And obviously, Winnipeg, I'm sure, will be motivated for this game tonight. They have a sizable lead in the Central, but still want to find a way to beat LA for the first time in 3 matchups. Now, let's take a look as we welcome you back. Let's take a look at our 2 best bets for tonight. As we say for the end, 1 side and 1 total for the first period. And the first one we're going to do, a little contrarian, but I don't mind that. Sometimes you got to go contrarian. We're going to take the Red Wings tonight. They're plus 125 against the Blues as we go back to the sheet. And St. Louis, they're the hottest team in hockey right now. They've won 9 in a row. They're off a big win at Colorado, 2-1. They came from a 2-0 deficit, came back to beat the Predators 3-2 on Thursday. Now they are home and they welcome in the Red Wings. And you see what they've done of late, at least at home. They've scored 2 goals or more 5 times since February 25th at home. And somehow St. Louis has caught fire at the right time. They're looking at getting one of the wild card berths in the Western Conference. Looking at Detroit, they beat Boston on Saturday. And this Red Wing team, they had some hope earlier in the season. They'd be a playoff team, probably going to fall short when it's all said and done. But a number I dug up, and again, you need things to work out. The last 19 games for the Red Wings, when allowing 1 or less in the first period, they're 9-1-9. Now, understandably, they have 9 ties in that, but they've trailed 1 time in the last 19 games, and they allow 1 or less in the first period. So as long as they don't get torched by St. Louis, they could find a way to even give up 1. Maybe worst case scenario, it's a 1-1 game. Maybe Detroit scores 2 and leads 2-1. Yes, when you give up 2 or more in the first period, chances are you're probably not going to lead. But when they've given up 1 or less, they've been pretty good. And off this win over Boston, now they're facing a St. Louis team that did shut out Detroit back on December 23rd at Little Caesars Arena. And the Red Wings won that game, or lost that game rather, 4-0 to the Blues. They trailed 1-0, lost 4-0. So I'm sure the Red Wings will want to have a little bit of revenge here. And if you can get Cam Talbot to play well, then the Red Wings will have an opportunity. St. Louis has been excellent. There's nothing you could take away from them. But I think after the win over Colorado, maybe have a little bit of a letdown tonight here against Detroit back at home. So let's go with the Red Wings in the first period. Now for our total, we're going to go to Calgary and Utah, and we're going to take the first period under between these teams. Let's begin with the Flames. And Calgary, on a 4-game under streak, they've been a really good under team of late. And you see they've had 1 goal or less in those 4 games. And Dustin Wolf will probably start tonight. Dan Vladar played last night in their win over Colorado. They came back and won in the shootout. But Dustin Wolf will play on the back-to-back here, and he has 4 straight unders in the first period. The Flames are 6-3 to the under this year with no rest in the first period. And they were 6-1. They've gone over the last 2 times. One of them was against the Rangers back on March 18th. But still, Calgary, they play these low-scoring first periods. Also, going back to their first few meetings this season, you had a 1-1 game back on January 2nd through 1, a game that the Flames lost 5-3 at home to the hockey club. And before that, there was a 2-0 game that the Flames lost in Salt Lake City, and a 5-1 defeat in that one. So you'll probably have a little lower scoring. I'm sure Calgary, even off last night's win over Colorado, now you make the trip to Utah. Not easy, just because of all that altitude. That happens also in the NBA when the Jazz and the Nuggets, when you have back-to-backs with those, it's never easy. But we'll see if Calgary can keep that up. Now, with Utah, what they've done of late, they're back from this 3-game road trip. They won at Chicago on Sunday, but 3 straight games they haven't scored a goal in the first period. And a number here, Utah 7-0 the under the last 7 against unrested teams in the first period. So when teams come in on the second of a back-to-back, usually those are low-scoring first periods. So we're going to have that with Utah and Calgary tonight in the first period in Salt Lake City. Again, thank you very much for tuning in here to Proline TV. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our videos here on this channel. Also, you can find me on X at Rogers Picks. And if you have any questions about the sheet or want access to the sheet, just DM me and I'll give you access to the sheet. And that's all. We'll talk to you again coming up on Thursday. We appreciate you tuning in. And as always, best of luck with your bets.